Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we are in our 32nd year, I talk to writers about their craft, what they're working on, what they've accomplished, what they're planning for the future. It's a wider net than that, however. We have had on other brands of artists, a couple of sculptors, a couple of musicians, a couple of actors. So if you have an idea for an artist who might be a good fit for the Writer's Block, writer or other variety, watch for our address at the end of the show. We'd be very happy to get your suggestion. I also want to remind you that the Writer's Block and all the other original programming that comes out of 1623 Studios is a result of cable access television. It's not a service you get if you subscribe to Dish or any other way to access the internet. The cable is a real good investment in community art and community communications. You stick with cable, stick with the Writer's Block. I'm very happy to say this evening we do have a writer by the name of Captain William Russell Webster. He is a retired Coast Guard captain who is now a writer and historian who's worked extensively on accidents off the New England and East Coast. For instance, he wrote the Pendleton disaster off Cape Cod and the Soleil Mar tragedy off Martha's Vineyard. Important for us, he is now working on a book about the loss of the Patriot, the fishing vessel out of Gloucester that was lost in 2009. Russ Webster, welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm glad you could come up for this taping. It's a topic that's close to my heart and close to many Gloucester citizens.
Thank you, John. I appreciate you having me on. I also appreciate being able to use your poem in the book.
Thank you.
Perhaps we could talk about that later.
I'm honored that you chose it. Can you give us a little bit about your general biographical background? Where did you grow up? You told me before the show, but I want to ask you again.
Sure. I grew up in New London, Connecticut. I went to Mitchell Junior College. We used to call it MIT by the Sea there in New London, Connecticut. And eventually went to the Coast Guard Academy, graduated in 1977. And then I had a wonderful career with the Coast Guard for 26 years. They were very generous. They sent me to the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey. They sent me to the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island. And I had such hazardous assignments as 2 tours in Honolulu, 2 shipboard tours. They made me stay at Monterey for 2 years and go to school and paid me.
That's tough.
And they also, courtesy of the fact that we had Russian ships in the Bering Sea, sent me to Russian intensive immersive language courses as well. So,
wow, you still speak a little Russian?
Конечно. After the Coast Guard, I worked with the Transportation Security Administration out of Logan Airport for 5 years. And then after that, I transitioned over to the Federal Emergency Management Agency out of Boston. I worked with them for 8 years, took a couple years off, was an instructor at both the Massachusetts Maritime Academy as well as the University of New Haven in Emergency Management and Homeland Security. And I returned to federal service in 2019 as the regional administrator for FEMA out of Boston, covering the 6 northeastern states.
Were you ever stationed in Gloucester?
No, I wasn't. The closest I came, I was the Woods Hole Rescue Commander from 1998 to 2001.
So in Massachusetts, though.
In Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts. Well, that's close.
Yeah.
Now, I know you were involved in investigations while you were still serving of vessels. Can you give us, before I turn to the Patriot, which I want to spend most time on, can you give us just a brief description of what that work was like?
You're talking about the previous...
Yes, the Pendleton, say, or the
sure.
Marley Soul.
Yeah. The Pendleton, the 1952 Pendleton rescue is heralded and recognized as the greatest nearshore rescue by the Coast Guard. And what it involved was 4 Coast Guardsmen. The oldest was about 28 years old, embarking in a 36-foot motor lifeboat, crossing the Chatham Bar at night, and going out and rescuing 32 seamen off a broken T2 type tanker off Chatham. I was fortunate to have been told the story in 1998 when I first arrived at Woods Hole. Chatham was part of that area of responsibility. And I actually got to know the 4 rescuers personally.
Were they still serving?
No. I was the rescue commander. They were all retired.
Oh, this is, yeah, I forgot the date.
52.
I forgot the date, yes. So they were not still serving.
No. But they all became close friends. One of the things that I did after Woods Hole, when I was the chief of operations for the entire Northeast District, was we celebrated their 50th anniversary of the rescue in 2002, both in Boston and Chatham, and reissued their gold life-saving medals, and had some wonderful storytelling and ceremonies. So that was the 52 Pendleton rescue. I think many people know about that as a result of the Disney movie, The Finest Hours,
Yes.
by Casey Sherman and another author. The other,
And the other one, I misstated the name Solimar tragedy.
right, the Solimar
Off
tragedy
Martha's Vineyard.
was March 25th, 1990. The Hokinsons, the father and son, Hokie Hokinson and Billy Hokinson, were out fishing about 9:15 at night. They something terrible happened quickly, perhaps similar to the Patriot. Billy was able to get off a 4.5-second heavily garbled distress call, and I investigated that case, saw where 3 different Coast Guard commands had listened to the same information, and unfortunately, a minute and 20 seconds after Billy's final call for help, a vindictive hoax caller joined the fray and said words to the effect, "Yeah, Coast Guard, I'm in trouble here," and then they're followed by laughter. And unfortunately, the senior controller at the time out of Woods Hole connected the 2 cases erroneously and dismissed the original call. So it
Was the vindictive person tracked down?
They know from where the call came from, only because only one of the stations heard that call. The Woods Hole station was the only one. So the call likely came from the nearby Eel Pond area, right in the Woods Hole area, from shore or a boat that was moored there. But no, they never caught the person involved.
And you were serving at that time?
I was.
You were still, and you were at Woods Hole during that
Not
time?
at that time. I didn't get there till about 8 years later. I had a communications background, and one of the first things I did when I got to Woods Hole was I verified that the communication gap where Billy Hokinson's heavily garbled call had come from was still present, and we fixed it during my tenure, and it wasn't until several years later that the entire network of Coast Guard VHF FM distress calling was fixed with a new system called Rescue 21.
So you had extensive experience in learning from your fellow Coast Guardsmen about search and rescue and being involved in search and rescue yourself to bring to bear on the Gloucester tragedy of 2009 when Matt Russo and John Orlando were lost on the Patriot in January 2009 in cold sea. How did you and when did you get interested in covering and writing a book about the loss of the Patriot?
I was friends with the sector commander in 2009 who had the ultimate responsibility for the case. And by that time, I'd already, first of all, I had experience overseeing 12,000 rescue cases by that particular time.
How many again?
12,000.
That's what I thought you said.
And I knew the sector commander out of Boston who was responsible for the area. I knew the admiral. I knew the two admirals involved. And the sector commander invited me in to give lessons learned perspective from the historic cases I'd written about to that time. And they enabled me to listen to what they learned at the time. And one of the reasons that I was motivated to write this book was they were unfortunately in 2009 brandishing a set of lessons learned that were 12 years old from another book that I wrote. And I frankly was mortified that my service hadn't completely incorporated and inculcated those 12-year-old lessons learned from another major
The way
tragedy.
technology moves, 12 years is a long, long
is.
time. It's eons in terms of technology. So you were interested in the Patriot early.
I've captured material for the better part of 11 years in order to write this. There's
Now, to make sure that our audience gets a feel for this, you have brought along generously some still photographs that I would like to turn to now, and our wonderful director, Becky Coyle, will show them as we talk. The first of the stills is the man at the wheel, the famous, nationally famous, iconic statue just about a half a mile from us right now, who oversees the cenotaph with the names of all of the lost sailors over the last 150 years or so. So that cenotaph picture is very, very powerful. Then more specifically, you brought a picture of the names of the Patriot crew, Matt Russo and John Orlando, who appear on a plaque in the cenotaph. And I should mention there are other names too. Mr. Rhine appears, who was lost on a herring boat in 2010. Peter Pribot, who was on the show, a writer himself, was lost off his lobster boat in 2011. And Jaime Ortiz, an Honduran native, was lost off a lobster boat in 2009. But of course, we're focusing on Matt and John. The third picture, and we talked about this before the show, is of a parade. I believe it's St. Peter's Fiesta,
Yeah.
and they're carrying, who is carrying the Patriot sign?
Well, principally, it's an oar with the Patriot emblazoned on it, and what you have is the smaller child in it is Salvatore Moses Russo, who is Matt's son, and he was about 3 years old when his dad died, unfortunately. And next to him, the taller Russo is Salvatore Eric Russo, the son of Sal Russo, who I worked with extensively on the boat. And the rest of the people in that picture are, of course, various family members from the Orlando and Russo families. I think the cenotaph was important for me because it was representative of the harsh hardship that the sailors went through. And I have one chapter in the book that's entitled 5,300 because that's the rough number of people that have perished
Out of
Gloucester. And the National Institute of Health captured data from 2000 to 2009 in New England, and 85 sailors perished in that 9-year period, approximately 9 sailors a year. 40 of those sailors in that 9-year period from 2000 to 2009 were from Gloucester.
It is tragic to, I go down to the cenotaph still often, although I've been here for almost 50 years, but it's still powerful. We have one more picture.
Yep.
I want Becky Coyle to show us finally a picture of the Patriot in harbor with the crew, John and Matt, standing on the bow of the boat. John Russo, the younger man, was the captain. Matt Russo, the younger man, was the captain.
Right.
His father-in-law John Orlando was the crew.
Crew. Yeah, I spent a great deal of time in the book acquainting the readers with the two people that died. Matt was 36 when he passed, and John was 58.
I'm very glad you provided those pictures. It gave me a feel, although I'd seen many pictures of those two gentlemen at the time of their loss, but it brought it right back because it was a tragic month for Gloucester, January 2009, because of their loss.
Yeah, and there's an entire chapter devoted to the two gentlemen and who they were, how funny they were when they were underway, their personalities. Matt Russo was a wonderful father and husband, and he was also a very giving person. Part of that chapter is how and why the boat became named the Patriot. It used to be the Danielle Marie. And you know, the story, depending on who I interviewed, changed. Matt himself, as in a story written by Peter Privet in 2008, says, "I'm the ultimate patriot," and expressing a sense of Americana. Other people told me that he named the boat the Patriot because his son, Salvatore Moses, had been born on the third Monday in April. And yet again, other people told me he named it after his friend Dave Allen, who is a military medic who died, unfortunately, in a tragic motorcycle accident during a rainstorm. And yet another story came out where he was a rabid Patriot fan and known to be the one that brought the victuals to every pregame. And
so the mixed stories, as there always are. This would be a good point to inject the date, the name of the book, the title of your book. Is the final title in place?
No.
No, the editors haven't had their final say yet. When is the book coming out?
The rough title right now is Gloucester's Grief, the Tragic Sinking of the Fishing Vessel Patriot.
Would you say that again, please, Russ?
Gloucester's Grief, the Tragic Sinking of the Fishing Vessel Patriot. And I expect it'll be out in either February or March 2022.
Okay, we're taping a little bit before that, but our audience, and especially people who are attuned to Gloucester, whether they live here or not, will be anxious to get that book. We talked before the show a little bit about the science that went into a couple of investigations, the rescue investigation and then the process of cause of loss, I would say. Tell me something about the science and what happened to the ship, to the boat.
Yeah, I think the conventional science in the approach the Coast Guard took to coming up with theories, and there was no conclusive single cause that the Coast Guard came up with for the sinking. Their traditional science was they impounded the tow wire of a nearby tug and tow because, like the community, the Coast Guard tracked every commercial vessel that was anywhere near the Patriot's site of sinking, and they knew that the Gateway Endeavor and its tug was nearby, and so they had a automatic information system that had his position of the tug and tow. They also had the vessel monitoring system, which was a NMFIS, National Marine Fisheries System, NOAA, law enforcement system to track commercial fishing vessels on the Patriot.
So they had three sources, three locational sources.
They actually had three. They had the commercial tug and tows tracking system, the AIS. They had the vessel monitoring system on the Patriot itself. And the third is the other system I'll get into in a little bit about from the right whale listening buoys. But They knew to a near approximateness that the Patriot and the tug and tow did not come any closer than 2 miles to each other, and that closest point of approach happened at midnight on January 3rd, 2009. The Coast Guard also did its due diligence and captured the tow wire and examined that to make sure there was no paint on it that matched the Patriot. The tug and tow also had 3 cameras, 1 forward facing, 2 aft facing. Reviewed those tapes and found no evidence that the tug and tow had been involved with the Patriot at all. The community writ large was concerned based on the history of a 1996 case where the tug Huma ran down a 45-foot fishing vessel off of Gloucester. So that was the community's mentality.
So it had happened before, so.
Right, the
very
Heather
well
Lynn
happened
too.
again.
So that science was involved. They sent ROVs down on the wreck to take imagery. And probably the area the Coast Guard put most of its faith in the cause of the sinking had to do with stability. And they thought that for a number of reasons. Number one, you had these 2 guys that had 40 plus years experience between the 2 of them. They had a great safety record. They had 7 radios on board. They had 2 satellite emergency position indicating radio beacons, EPIRBs that would indicate that they were in distress. They had a life raft. They had immersion suits. And they knew because of the condition of the bodies that neither person had time to get in their immersion suits. They got no traditional distress signals until hours after what was known to be the time, later known to be the time of sinking. And the Coast Guard was dealing with the absence of normal affirmative declarations of distress from a group of experienced mariners. So they knew something happened suddenly.
Extremely suddenly.
Extremely suddenly. And that caused them to take a look at the stability of the Patriot by interviewing past crewmen, family members, and others about what equipment was on board. Vessels less than 79 feet are not required to go through stability testing. So there was no baseline to look at. They could only talk to the 3rd crewman who didn't make the trip and ask, what equipment was added over the last year or so since June 2008 when Matt put the boat in service. And they had pictures of the boat underway, that they were estimating the stability characteristics. They also knew from the way the nets were positioned on the bottom that the boat likely had just hauled back a large catch, and it was suspended at the time that something happened very quickly. And so their prevailing theory, based on their science center, Marine Science Center modeling, was that there was a possibility that the boat had become unstable because of free-flowing water on the deck and the suspended weight of the fish, coupled perhaps with the seaway. But there's nothing definitive in that analysis, because there's no way to really know if the stability of the boat was the actual cause of the sinking.
Is that the most likely description according to these investigations?
It's according
So
to...
the possibility is that because of the weight of the vessel, the weight of the fish suspended, and the free water, it capsized quickly.
It is a possibility, but there's no way to be definitively certain why the Patriot sank unless the boat is raised and they actually conduct stability testing on the boat, and they're able to examine parts of the boat that are covered because the boat rests on its starboard side. There are some questions still unanswered. There's a 10-ton block that the family recovered that has been extremely damaged. There's a radar pedestal that is bent 90 degrees by a horrific force that is not easily explainable by a boat turning over quickly as a result of stability. The family posited the possibility that a submarine had caught onto the net somehow, and I investigated that. It seems not very plausible. One, because of the depth of water there, 100 feet. Two, because the position of the net believed to be suspended at the time and recovered. But my research also revealed that submarine fishing vessel interactions are much more common than I had even imagined.
On 100 feet of water, a submarine would have very little
Right.
maneuverability. And in fact,
Yeah.
big submarines are practically 100 feet tall.
Right. At least 65, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think we talked about science before, and the other unique feature of the book, coupled with my background as an anti-submarine warfare officer, is I knew the Coast Guard had captured the noises, both the engine noises and the auxiliary machinery noises, from a earlier December 2008 voyage that the Patriot had made to the same area in Middle Ground, which is 15 miles east of Gloucester. And those noises gave a baseline of what was happening on the boat, and I was able to recreate from the moment those bottom-mounted whale listening buoys came in contact with the noises from the Patriot, exactly what was going on the boat.
In terms of the engines.
In terms of the engines, and then by interviewing people who had been on there, they would tell me, oh, they've engaged the power takeoff to do this. They've engaged the freshwater washdown system to do that.
We're very close to our time limit.
Sure.
I want to suggest to our audience, if they want to find out all the details of this wonderful mystery that you're describing, they buy your book, which you would tell me, please tell me the title again.
Right now it's Gloucester's Grief, the Tragic Sinking of the Fishing Vessel Patriot.
By William Russell Webster. Thank you very much for being a guest on the Writer's Block, Captain Webster.
Thank you, John.
It's been fun, and I know it's going to be fun for everybody that sees this show, because the loss of the Patriot was a great blow to the city.
Yeah, I think the one thing in the book that I want to leave you with is that the book explores the relationship today between the city of Gloucester and the Coast Guard, such that the city of Gloucester is now pursuing that it become a Coast Guard city, one of 30 nationwide, recognizing the positive relationship.
That's another reason to buy the book.
It is.
Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks, John.
I want to thank everybody in our TV audience for being with the show, being an audience for the show. If you've learned something from Captain Webster about the Patriot, his research and his writing about the Patriot, then the Writer's Block has done its job. I hope to see you again next time on the Writer's Block. Good night.